Missing persons cases are always sad, especially those involving children. But this case is one of the more bizarre ones I've ever heard. It happened back in 2004 in Portugal, and although it's technically solved, the girl's body was never found, and many questions still remain. This is the case of Joana Cipriano. Joana Isabel Cipriano was born around 1996, the result of a relationship that lasted just 4 months. She had at least 5 siblings and half-siblings, and most of them lived with other relatives. From everything I can tell, Joana was close with her mother but rarely saw her father. When Joana was 3, her mother began a relationship with a man named Leandro Silva. Some sources referred to Leandro Silva as Joana's stepfather, but others say he and Joana's mother, Lenore, never married. It's possible that they weren't married, but these sources just referred to him as Joana's stepfather because it was easier to say. Regardless, Leandro Silva would be in Joana's life until her disappearance. Growing up, Joana was described as gentle, friendly, and a good student, but teachers at her school noticed something was off. They said Joana had too many adult responsibilities at home and was given far more chores than what a child her age should have had. They also said that she would cry sometimes at school, but was very closed off and would never really tell anybody what was going on. Other teachers said Joana never showed any signs that things were bad at home. Sometime in 2004, a formal complaint was filed against Joana's family due to concern for the now 8-year-old's welfare. School officials were concerned about her subnutrition and all of the work she had to do around the house. As far as I could find, no action was ever taken. There is conflicting information about Joana's living situation at the time of her disappearance. I've seen some people say she lived with her grandmother, but most sources seem to say she lived with her mother, stepfather, and 2 younger siblings. But wherever she actually was living, Joana was last seen alive on the night of Sunday, September 12, 2004. Around 8 p.m., Joana headed out to buy milk and 2 cans of tuna. The shop she bought them from was about 500 meters from her home, and she was last publicly seen walking toward the village church about 200 yards from her house. I've seen some people say the milk and tuna was found in the house later, but most sources say it was never found. Joana was reported missing 4 days later, on September 16th. Searches were conducted around the family home in the village of Figueira, in the woods close by, and bodies of water. The search extended as far as Castro Marim, where Joana's grandparents lived. The case gained national attention. Joana's mother, Lenore Cipriano, distributed posters and made TV appearances, begging for the safe return of her daughter, who she believed had been abducted. Rumors flew that Joana had been killed or sold, but others looked in a different direction for answers. Before the month was over, residents of Figueira already suspected Lenore and her brother João. They speculated that Joana had been killed because she took money from Lenore, João, or their mother, Joana's grandmother. Either Lenore or João had a record of petty theft. Due to translations, I couldn't tell 100% which one. Because of Joana's home life, a neighbor speculated early on that Lenore might be involved. Another witness said she overheard 2 men talking near a church shortly after the disappearance. One of them said, "Tell me where you put the girl, or I'll kill you." The other said, "It was in a plastic bag from a supermarket." It's not really clear what it is, but I think we can all make an educated guess. But it wasn't just gossip that made Lenore and João look guilty. Blood splatters were found on the wall of the family home, as well as on the floor, a freezer, a bucket, and a mop stem. Most of the blood was human, but it couldn't be determined if it was Joana's. Traces of bone, hair fragments, and fibers similar to Joana's clothes were found in a pig farm over 300 meters north of Figueira. Other sources say the farm was actually in Figueira. Clothes belonging to João and a plastic bag believed to be used by Lenore were also found, I believe, at the same location. This discovery led to police's most prominent theory, that Joana had been killed and her body had been fed to pigs. Lenore and João were both questioned in the weeks following Joana's disappearance. Despite the evidence investigators already had against them, it wasn't long before they got the break they felt they really needed: confessions. Lenore confessed to murder on September 24th, and João confessed 2 days later. Another source said Lenore confessed on October 13th. One other thing I wanted to bring up was a quote said by João at some point during the case that became very well known. I'm not sure exactly when it was said, but in Portuguese it read, "Eu não lhe fiz mal, só a matei." This roughly translates to, "I didn't hurt her, I only killed her." Lenore and João were arrested and charged, first in relation to Joana's disappearance and later with first-degree murder. But before they could face trial, the story got even more twisted. In March 2005, photos of Lenore appeared all over newspapers in Portugal. The photos showed bruises all over her body, as well as 2 black eyes. Lenore accused 8 members of the Judicial Police, also known as the PJ, of torture. Lenore said she was forced to kneel on glass ashtrays with a bag covering her head and beaten in order to extract a confession. The PJ denied this. They said Lenore's injuries had been inflicted from a suicide attempt in which she tried to throw herself down a flight of stairs. And she wasn't the only alleged victim of this torture. João and another brother of theirs, Nelson, were also reportedly assaulted by the PJ. João's injuries were so bad he had to go to the emergency room. That same month, it was speculated that Lenore might be released due to lack of evidence, but that never happened. Lenore and João's trial began on October 12, 2005. According to the prosecution, Joana had walked in on her mother and João having sex. She threatened to expose their incestuous relationship to her stepfather, who had been in her life since she was a toddler and who she regarded as a father. Not wanting this to happen, João killed his niece by bashing her head against a wall. Then he dismembered her, kept her body in a freezer for a few days, and drove it out to the pig farm, allowing it to be consumed. The theory that Joana had been killed after witnessing a sexual encounter between her mother and uncle had been circulating for months, though I've never found any concrete evidence of this incestuous relationship. During the trial, the jury learned of João's detailed confession to police and how he'd used a mannequin to show how he'd cut Joana's body into 3 parts. Neither Lenore or João actually spoke during the trial, but I believe a video of the confession was shown to the jury. Jurors were also told about the forensic evidence that had been found. In November, Lenore and Joana Cipriano were found guilty of first-degree murder and concealment of a body. They were sentenced to 20 and 19 years in prison, respectively. Those sentences were later reduced to 16 years each. After the trial, several Portuguese lawyers spoke out, saying they didn't believe there was enough evidence for a conviction. The jury disagreed, citing forensic evidence as a major part of why they'd found them guilty. The trial also made Portuguese history as the first murder trial in the country that had taken place without a body being found. This case is already crazy enough, but it gets even crazier. Just over 2.5 years after Joana's disappearance, another girl would go missing in Portugal, and this case would make international headlines. Madeleine Mccann was a 3-year-old British girl who vanished on May 3, 2007. At the time of her disappearance, she was vacationing with her family in Praia da Luz, about 24 kilometers from Figueira, the village where Joana lived. In the years following, there has been plenty of speculation that Joana and Madeleine's cases may be connected. There are plenty of similarities in the cases, and not just on the surface. Both involved young girls who went missing. Both girls disappeared from Portuguese towns not too far from each other, and within a 3-year span. In both cases, the parents of the children were suspected, and both investigations shared a common and controversial investigator, Gonçalo Amaral. I didn't follow Madeleine Mccann's case all that closely, but I'm sure those of you who did remember Amaral, as he apparently became pretty well known from it. Amaral was criticized in the British press for working short hours, taking long lunches, drinking quite a bit during said lunches, and not following up on most of the tips. His inexperience was also brought up, as he'd only investigated 2 child murders in a 26-year career. He was also one of the officers accused of torturing Lenore and Joana Cipriano. In September 2007, Amaral was arrested for falsifying evidence in Joana's case. On October 1st, he was removed from the Mccann case and transferred to another city. On October 27, 2008, Amaral and 4 other officers went on trial. It took 8 months for a judge to conclude that Lenore had been attacked in the PJ headquarters. but it couldn't be determined which of the officers accused had actually taken part. Amaral was found guilty of giving false evidence and given an 18-month suspended sentence. Another inspector, Antonio Cardoso, was found guilty of forging documents and given a 2-year suspended sentence. After the trial, Amaral was also accused of assaulting Joana's stepfather, Leandro Silva. Amaral allegedly grabbed Leandro by the throat and punched him in the abdomen and face, all the while demanding he tell him where Joana was. Leandro said he wasn't able to work for 5 days after this incident. I did want to mention the book he wrote that you may have heard of. It's called Maddie, The Truth of the Lie, and it's obviously about Madeleine McCann's disappearance, but from his perspective. I've linked below what I believe, or at least hope, is a legal English translation of the book online, if you want to check it out for yourself. So this case is technically solved. 2 people have been tried and convicted for the murder. These convictions have never been overturned. They're still considered guilty under the law, though both have since retracted their confessions, saying they were coerced. But so many questions still remain. Did Lenore and Joao really kill Joana? Was she killed for witnessing incest? And if not, what happened to her? First, let's look at the possibility that the jury got it wrong and Lenore and Joao are innocent. The first piece of evidence to suggest this is obvious: police coercion. Lenore alleged that she was assaulted by police in order to extract a confession, and presumably she only confessed to make the beating stop. After the trial, Joao said he only confessed and gave details of the supposed murder because police were threatening to stab him. A trial did determine that beatings occurred, at least in Lenore's case. It's never been determined who assaulted her, or if the assault allegations by Joana Cipriano or Leandro Silva were true. However, these allegations are worth knowing, and as always, I would ask that you use your own judgment to form your own conclusion. There is one more related thing I find worth noting. When police asked Joao to show them where he had buried Joana's remains, he pointed out at least 20 different locations, and of course her body wasn't found in any of them. To me, this provides further evidence that he might be innocent, or maybe he just wanted to lead police on a wild goose chase or was reluctant to come clean. The next thing I want to talk about is crime scene contamination. Joana's house wasn't searched until September 22nd, 5 days after she was reported missing and 10 days after she was last seen in public. Police had already been walking in and out of the house, and family members had already cleaned the entire house with bleach. Similar accusations of contamination came up in Madeleine Mccann's case, and I've also seen them in a lot of other high-profile cases, such as the John Benet Ramsey case. Neither police brutality or crime scene contamination necessarily determine guilt or innocence on their own, but they are worth noting. Now let's look at some of the other theories as to what might have happened to Joana. As I researched this case and watched the story unfold, there was a lot of speculation that Joana had been sold to another couple, presumably because her family couldn't afford to care for her anymore. This is also the story that Joao has insisted was true ever since he retracted his confession. Even before the trial began, he said that Lenore had sold Joana in Spain. In June 2007, there was speculation that Joana had been sold for 50,000 euros. In a letter written to his sister in prison, Joao said that Joana had been sold and that she would likely come back to Portugal when she was older. Other sources suggest Joana may have been sold to pay off a drug debt. There's one other incident from early on that suggests Joana may still be alive. Nidio Rashado, a local market owner and friend of Joana, talked to Lenore after Joana went missing. Rashado noticed Lenore wasn't as visibly upset as he might have expected, and he asked her why. She told him that in her heart, she believed Joana was still alive. Rashado also recalled he'd never seen Lenore physically abuse her children. Was Lenore innocent and truly believed Joana was still alive, or was she just trying to cover for herself? I'll let you be the judge. After Madeleine Mccann's disappearance made international news, Joana's family urged police to look into a potential connection between the cases. According to them, a white and brown van with a German license plate had been parked near the Cipriano home just days before Joana went missing. The van was found a week later at an abandoned farm in Praia de Luz, which, if you remember, is the city Madeleine Mccann disappeared from. Joana's relatives urged police to look into the van and the man who owned it and, I believe, lived in it. They didn't listen. The van was owned by a man who appeared to be in his 40s and had short, curly brown hair. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any more information about this man or this potential lead. It's certainly possible, whoever he is, that he had something to do with Joana's disappearance, maybe even Madeleine's, but obviously we can't say for sure. The next theory I want to discuss is the theory that Joana was killed by someone other than Lenore or Joao, or that she was at least killed for another reason other than witnessing incestuous sex, as the prosecution suggested. In the early days of the investigation, the prominent theory was that Joana was killed for money, either by her mother, uncle, or grandmother. The amount was thought to be between 5 and 12 euros. Today, that would be the equivalent of roughly between 5 and 14 US dollars. In January 2005, Leandro Silva was briefly looked into. He would later say he wasn't at home the night Joana went missing. There doesn't seem to be much evidence, if any, that he was involved, so I don't think it's very likely that he was. But another man connected to him might be, which I'll get into in a second. The last bit of speculation in this case I want to talk about is probably the most disturbing. During the investigation, police obtained DNA samples from all of Joana's relatives, including her stepfather's 23-year-old half-brother, Carlos Alberto Silva. Carlos's DNA matched traces of what is believed to be semen found in Joana's underwear. This lead caused police to think that Joana was a victim of sexual abuse and that it might have led to her death. Police later said they couldn't find absolute proof of sexual abuse since Joana's body hadn't been found. In September 2007, Paulo Pereira Cristoval, one of the investigators on Joana's case and one of the ones accused of torture, wrote a book about the case, The Star of Joana. Cristoval believed Joana had been sexually abused and had been killed to cover it up. According to the book, unidentified biological material thought to be sperm was found on Joana's bed covering, mattress, and in her underwear. I believe this is the same unidentified material I mentioned a minute ago. Cristoval also theorized that Joao would rather admit to killing his niece than to abusing her. Even if this theory is true, it's still possible Joao was at least partially responsible for Joana's disappearance, as well as her death, but he would have had a different motivation than the prosecution suggested. In 2010, Lenore requested to leave prison to spend Christmas with her mother. Her request was denied because she had only served a quarter of her sentence. Leandro Silva also refused to accept her back in the home that he still shared with their 2 children, who were 8 and 6 at the time. Lenore and Joao's mother, Joana's grandmother, had initially believed her children were innocent. But once their trial came around, she didn't seem so sure. She said if any of her children had killed Joana, it would have been Joao, who had always been a naughty boy. She did, however, say that she's never seen Lenore treat Joana badly. In 2011, Lenore's lawyer submitted a complaint to the UN due to the torture that Lenore and allegedly Joao had received. In 2013, Lenore was sentenced to an extra 7 months in prison due to contradictory statements made to the police during the investigation. On February 7, 2019, Lenore was released on parole after serving 14 and a half years of her 16-year sentence. After her release, she once again claimed she was innocent and said she would now focus her efforts on trying to find Joana. She also asked whoever had Joana to please return her. Joao was released in March 2019 after serving his full sentence, though he only served 15 years of the 16-year sentence. He too said he thought Joana was still alive. He still maintains that she was sold to another couple. He wanted to live with his mother upon his release, but of course she refused to let him. She's also implied since that she doesn't want to have anything to do with Lenore either. Joao has denied sexually abusing Joana and sleeping with Lenore. He has also said the family had financial difficulties and Joana had been sold for 50,000 euros. In the years following the trial, jurors have expressed their doubts about the verdict as well. This is just about everything I have on the case up to the present day, and I would love to know what you think. Do you think Joana was killed, kidnapped, or sold? Do you think Lenore and Joao really had something to do with it? Do you think the jury was correct? Or do you think their confessions were coerced? Or maybe both? Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.